Forget the history you learned in school. The textbooks tell you about wars, laws, and elections. But what if the real turning points, the moments that brought down queens and presidents, all started in the bedroom? We're not talking about simple love stories. We're talking about secret affairs that became ticking time bombs at the heart of power. Scandals so explosive they shattered empires, rewrote laws, and turned public opinion into a weapon of mass destruction. These are the moments the powerful prayed would stay buried, the moments their private passions became public disasters, and we're about to expose all of them. You're about to learn how a completely fake affair, a lie about a diamond necklace, was twisted into the ultimate propaganda to help execute a queen and fuel the French Revolution. We'll take you inside the Oval Office, where a secret romance with a 22-year-old intern led to a presidential impeachment and unleashed a media firestorm that changed politics forever. Then, we'll uncover the royal affair so out of control, a furious king passed a law that would dictate his family's love lives for the next 200 years. And finally, we'll dive into the legendary whispers between a Hollywood goddess and a president, a myth that became more powerful than the truth, ending in tragedy and conspiracy. Each of these scandals proves the same terrifying truth. The most powerful force in history isn't a crown or a constitution. It's forbidden passion. And when that passion goes public, it can change the world. Let's get into it. To understand our first scandal, you need to picture France in the 1780s. From the outside, the kingdom of Louis XVI is a glittering spectacle of opulence and power, centered on the magnificent palace of Versailles. But underneath all that gold leaf and silk, the nation is rotting from within. The treasury is bankrupt, drained by foreign wars and a tax system that crushed the poor. The people are starving, with the price of bread, the staple of their diet, skyrocketing to unattainable heights. All that simmering anger, that deep, desperate resentment, needed a target, and it found one, in the foreign-born queen, Marie Antoinette. Long before the scandal broke, she was already a symbol of everything the public despised about the monarchy. They called her l'Autrichienne, the Austrian, a constant reminder of her foreign roots. They whispered that she was frivolous, disconnected, and a reckless spender, saddling her with the nickname Madame Déficit. The public was primed, ready, and even eager to believe the absolute worst of her. And one of the most incredible scams in history was about to give them every reason to. This story isn't your classic affair of the heart. It's a scandal disguised as one, a weaponized rumor of a romance that did more damage than any real tryst ever could. At the center of it all are three unforgettable characters. First, Queen Marie Antoinette. She had been offered an insanely expensive diamond necklace by her husband, Louis XVI, and had smartly refused it, reportedly saying the kingdom had more need for 74s, naval ships, than of necklaces. The necklace itself was a monster, a cascade of 650 flawless diamonds, commissioned years earlier by the previous king, Louis XV, for his mistress. When he died before it was finished, the court jewelers were left with a piece of jewelry so expensive no one in Europe could afford it, and they were facing financial ruin. Our second player is Cardinal de Rohan, a man from one of France's most ancient noble families. He was ambitious, charming, and fabulously wealthy, but he desperately wanted the one thing he couldn't have: the Queen's approval. He had deeply offended her years earlier and was completely shut out of her influential inner circle. His ambition was so all-consuming, his desire to be back in the Queen's favor so profound, that he was willing to believe pretty much anything to make it happen. And that brings us to our final, most important character, the Comtesse de la Motte. Jeanne de la Motte was a master manipulator, a world-class grifter with a lineage that fueled her ambition. As a descendant of an illegitimate son of a French king, she felt entitled to a life of luxury she couldn't afford. She possessed a massive chip on her shoulder, and an unquenchable thirst for money and status. Seeing the cardinal's desperation and the jeweler's problem, she cooked up a scheme that was nothing short of diabolical genius. Jeanne cunningly befriended the cardinal, convincing him that she was a secret confidant of the Queen. She began passing him letters she had forged, supposedly from Marie Antoinette, hinting at a growing, secret friendship. The cardinal, completely blinded by his own wishful thinking, fell for it hook, line, and sinker. The con escalated until Jeanne arranged the centerpiece of her deception, a secret meeting at night in the shadowy groves of the Versailles Gardens. There, the cardinal met a woman he was told was the Queen, a woman who was actually a local prostitute Jeanne had hired for her resemblance. In the darkness, this fake queen whispered a few words of forgiveness, and handed him a rose. For Rohan, this was a triumph. He was utterly sold, believing he had finally won her over. A public circus. The ensuing trial was the spectacle of the century, and all of France was obsessed. Vicious pamphlets, pornographic cartoons, and gossip exploded across the country, painting Marie Antoinette not as the victim, but as a manipulative, sexually deviant mastermind who seduced a cardinal for jewelry while her people starved. In this narrative, she was the true villain. In the end, the court delivered a verdict that was a devastating blow to the monarchy. Cardinal de Rohan was acquitted. This was seen by the public as an implicit condemnation of the Queen, as it suggested the court found it perfectly believable that she could have been part of such a plot. Jeanne de la Motte was convicted and publicly flogged and branded with a V for voleuse, thief. But the real damage was already done. Marie Antoinette, though completely innocent, had her reputation utterly destroyed. The affair of the diamond necklace became the ultimate symbol of the monarchy's corruption, waste, and moral bankruptcy. It fed the revolutionary fire that was already smoldering across the nation, and just a few years later, that fire would erupt into the French Revolution. It was a love affair that never even happened, but its phantom existence helped bring down a dynasty. Let's jump forward 200 years to a different kind of palace, the White House. The 1990s were a time of dizzying change. The Cold War was over, the American economy was booming, and a strange new thing called the Internet was beginning to reshape our world. At the center of it all was President Bill Clinton, a charismatic, deeply popular, and politically gifted leader in his second term. But beneath the surface of peace and prosperity, a storm was brewing, one that would not only threaten his presidency, but permanently change the definition of public office and alter the landscape of American media and politics. This scandal, unlike our last one, was very real, and it was intensely personal for its two main players, the most powerful man on the planet, and a 22-year-old White House intern named Monica Lewinsky. Their relationship began in 1995, during a federal government shutdown that sent most of the paid staff home. This left a skeleton crew of unpaid interns to pick up the slack, which is how Lewinsky ended up working in close proximity to the Oval Office. Over the next year and a half, a secret, intermittent relationship developed between the 49-year-old president and the young intern, a relationship defined by a colossal power imbalance and the crushing pressure of secrecy. The affair might have remained a secret if it weren't for two crucial intersecting factors. The first was a disgruntled White House employee named Linda Tripp. Lewinsky, needing someone to confide in, told Tripp everything about her relationship with the president. What she didn't know was that Tripp, her supposed friend, was secretly recording their phone conversations. Those tapes would become the bombshell that blew the story wide open. The second factor was a completely separate legal battle. Independent counsel Kenneth Starr had been appointed years earlier to investigate the Clintons' pre-presidency financial dealings in a real estate venture known as Whitewater. The investigation had dragged on for years with little to show for it. When Linda Tripp approached Starr's team with her tapes, he saw a new, more promising path forward. Starr realized he could potentially prove that the president had not only had an affair, but had also committed perjury by lying about it under oath in a different sexual harassment lawsuit filed by a woman named Paula Jones. Suddenly, the investigation pivoted from complex financial matters to perjury and obstruction of justice. On January 17, 1998, the story broke, not in a major newspaper, but on a little-known website called The Drudge Report, which reported that Newsweek magazine was holding back the explosive story. This act of digital rebellion kicked off a new era where the internet could outpace and drive the traditional news cycle. The mainstream press, now playing catch-up, jumped on the story, and the scandal detonated across the globe. A few days later, President Clinton, standing beside the First Lady, wagged his finger at a press conference and delivered one of the most infamous lines in political history. "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky." It was a firm, forceful, and unequivocal denial, and, as the world would later discover, a meticulously constructed lie. For the next 7 months, America was consumed by the scandal. The 24-hour news cycle, still a relatively new phenomenon, fed the public a non-stop diet of salacious details and legal speculation. The national conversation wasn't just about sex, it was about power, privacy, what constitutes an impeachable offense, and the very definition of truth. The investigation culminated in the Starr Report, a 445-page document released online to a shocked public. It contained graphic, explicit details of the affair, including the now infamous evidence of a blue dress stained with the president's DNA, which Lewinsky had saved. An estimated 20 million Americans read it online within the first 48 hours, crashing government servers. The political fallout was immense. Based on the evidence that Clinton had lied under oath to a federal grand jury, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives voted to impeach him on December 19, 1998, on 2 articles: perjury and obstruction of justice. Bill Clinton became only the second president in U.S. history to be impeached. The country was fiercely and bitterly divided. Clinton's supporters argued that while his behavior was morally wrong, it was a private matter that did not rise to the level of for removal from office. They saw the investigation as a partisan witch hunt. His opponents argued that a president lying under oath about anything was a fundamental attack on the rule of law that could not be tolerated. In the end, following a 5-week trial, the Senate acquitted President Clinton on both charges, falling well short of the 2/3 majority required for conviction. He served out the rest of his term, but the consequences were profound. Public trust in government was deeply wounded. The scandal ushered in an age of hyper-partisan politics that we are still living in today, and it cemented an era where the private lives of public figures were seen as fair game for political combat. For Monica Lewinsky, the consequences were life-shattering. She was publicly shamed on a global scale, becoming, for a time, the most humiliated woman in America. In the years since, she has powerfully reclaimed her own narrative, re-emerging as a thoughtful and compelling anti-bullying advocate. But the scandal remains a stark reminder of how a private affair, when mixed with political power and media saturation, can have world-altering and deeply personal consequences. Okay, we have to hit pause for a second. We've gone from the gilded courts of 18th century France to the hyper-partisan crucible of the 90s Oval Office, and believe me, the stories only get more intense from here. If you're finding this trip through the secret side of history fascinating, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps our channel immensely and ensures you won't miss what's coming next. We're about to head back to 18th century England for a royal scandal so messy, so public, it literally changed the law of the land. You don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the drama. Long before Marie Antoinette's Phantom Affair, or Monica Lewinsky's blue dress, a scandal rocked London that contained all the same explosive ingredients: a wayward royal, a beautiful and high-ranking noblewoman, a furious husband, and a public trial that aired all of their dirty laundry for a gossip-hungry public. This is the story of Prince Henry, Duke of Cumberland, and his torrid affair with Lady Grosvenor. A scandal so public and so damaging it forced his brother, King George III, to have Parliament pass a new law just to stop the royal family from ever causing that kind of chaos again. Our Prince Henry was the younger brother of King George III, and to put it mildly, he was a handful. While his older brother George was known for being famously pious, famously faithful to his wife Queen Charlotte, and a devoted family man, Henry had a well-earned reputation as a rake and a libertine. The king even tried to straighten him out by pushing him into a career in the Royal Navy, but it didn't take. Henry's appetite for pleasure was simply too great. Our other main player was Henrietta, Lady Grosvenor. She was married to one of the wealthiest men in all of England, Lord Grosvenor, and was a celebrated society beauty. Sometime in 1769, she and the king's wild younger brother began a passionate and reckless affair. And they were not exactly subtle. This was a full-blown romance, complete with clandestine meetups, secret signals, and a mountain of steamy explicit love letters. Their carelessness eventually caught up to them, when Lord Grosvenor's own servants caught the two of them in the act at an inn. For Lord Grosvenor this was the ultimate public humiliation. The king's own brother was sleeping with his wife. But in 18th century England, a nobleman had a very specific and very public way to get his revenge. He couldn't simply divorce his wife. First, he had to sue her lover for damages in a civil lawsuit called criminal conversation. The very name sounds odd to our modern ears, but the legal theory was based on the idea that a wife was, in the eyes of the law, her husband's property. By sleeping with her, another man had trespassed on that property and damaged its value, so Lord Grosvenor sued Prince Henry, a member of the royal family, for criminal conversation, and he asked for a lot of money. This is what turned a private affair into a national spectacle. The trial, held in 1770, was the only thing anyone in London was talking about. The star witnesses? The couple's own love letters. The deeply personal, often embarrassing letters were read aloud in open court, and the newspapers printed every single juicy, scandalous word for the public to devour. The public couldn't get enough of the royal drama. The court ultimately sided with Lord Grosvenor, finding the prince guilty of damaging his property. The jury ordered Prince Henry to pay Lord Grosvenor £10,000 in damages. In today's money, that's equivalent to over $2.5 million. It was a financial catastrophe for the prince, and a monumental public relations disaster for the crown. But Lady Grosvenor wasn't merely a passive victim in this drama. When her husband tried to use the verdict as grounds to secure a divorce from her in the ecclesiastical courts, she fought back with incredible tenacity. She dispatched her own agents to gather evidence of her husband's many affairs, with reports suggesting she personally went into brothels to find witnesses against him. Her counter-evidence of his own rampant infidelity was so overwhelming that the court denied Lord Grosvenor a divorce. He was legally stuck with the wife he had publicly shamed, and was required to financially support her for the rest of his life. For King George III, this was the final straw. His brother's messy, expensive, and humiliating public affair was bad enough. But then, not long after, Henry doubled down on his scandalous behavior by secretly marrying a commoner, a young widow named Anne Horton, without the king's permission. The king was furious. He felt he was losing control of his own family, whose romantic choices could threaten the stability of the throne. He decided to take drastic action. In 1772, pushed directly by his brother's behavior, the king had Parliament pass the Royal Marriages Act. This sweeping law made it illegal for most descendants of his grandfather King George II to marry without the reigning monarch's explicit permission. It was a direct and powerful attempt to control the love lives of his family and prevent them from making scandalous or politically inconvenient marriages. That law had massive and long-lasting consequences. For over 200 years, it dictated who could or could not marry into the British royal family, affecting generations of royals. The law remained largely in place until it was finally replaced by the Succession to the Crown Act, which took full effect in 2015, limiting the requirement for permission to only the first 6 in line to the throne. The affair between Prince Henry and Lady Grosvenor is far more than just a piece of forgotten gossip. It's a perfect example of how a deeply personal scandal could have real, lasting legal consequences that reshaped one of the world's most famous institutions, all because a prince couldn't keep his hands, or his love letters, to himself. Our final story might be the most famous and, in many ways, the most mysterious scandal of them all. It's a story that exists in a hazy world of rumor, mythology, and conjecture, starring 2 of the 20th century's most luminous icons, Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate Hollywood bombshell, and John F. Kennedy, the handsome, charismatic young president of the Camelot era. Their rumored affair has become the stuff of American folklore, a potent symbol of the seductive, glamorous, and dangerous intersection of celebrity and political power. Unlike our other stories, there is no stained blue dress, no court trial, no pile of intercepted letters read into the record. The hard evidence for a sustained affair is thin, based mostly on anecdotal accounts from biographies and insider stories, published years after both were gone. Most credible historians agree that they certainly knew each other, and likely had at a minimum a brief fling, possibly over a single weekend at Bing Crosby's Palm Springs house in March of 1962. But the specific facts of their relationship almost don't matter as much as the idea of it. The narrative was pure mythology. Camelot meets Hollywood, the most powerful man in the world and the most desired woman in the world, together in secret. That tantalizing idea captured the public imagination with an intensity that has never let go. The rumor mill went into overdrive on the night of May 19, 1962. The occasion was a massive, star-studded early 45th birthday party for President Kennedy at Madison Square Garden. The event was a Democratic Party fundraiser, and the stage was filled with stars like Ella Fitzgerald and Harry Belafonte. But one performance would become seared into the American memory forever. Near the end of the night, after being humorously introduced several times as the late Marilyn Monroe because of her tardiness, she finally appeared on stage. She slipped off a white ermine fur coat to reveal a skin-tight, flesh-colored gown covered in so many rhinestones that it seemed to sparkle like she was covered in diamonds. The dress was so tight she had to be sewn into it. The crowd of 15,000 people gasped. Then, in that famously sultry, breathy voice, she sang, "Happy Birthday, Mr. President." It was far more than a song. It was a cultural atom bomb. The performance was so intimate, so charged, that one journalist wrote it was like she was making love to the president in the direct view of 40 million Americans. When she finished, a grinning JFK took the stage and joked, "I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way." That performance was the public peak of the myth, but it was also effectively the end of their story. They reportedly mingled at a private after-party, where the only known photograph of them together, along with Robert Kennedy, was discreetly snapped by a White House photographer. After that night, they likely never saw each other again. Tragically, This was one of Marilyn's last major public appearances. Just 3 months later, in August 1962, she was found dead from a barbiturate overdose at the age of 36. A year after that, in November 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Their shocking, premature deaths cemented their connection in a permanent shroud of mystery and conspiracy. The rumored affair became a central plank in countless elaborate theories about Monroe's death. Did she know too much about political secrets from her pillow talk with the president? Was her supposed emotional instability seen as a threat to the Kennedy administration? Rumors flew that she kept a red diary full of state secrets. Some theories even suggested she was also involved with JFK's powerful brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, making her a liability to the entire dynasty. While virtually all credible historians and investigators have found no evidence of foul play in her death, the conspiracies live on, because they tap into a bigger, more compelling narrative. The Dark Side of Camelot. The story's incredible power isn't in the proven facts, but in what it represents. The idea that even the most powerful and glamorous people are vulnerable, and the tragic results that can unfold when intensely private lives crash into immense public pressure. It's a whisper of a scandal that grew into a legend, proving that sometimes, the most powerful affairs are the ones we can never truly know. So, after this journey through history's most secret and explosive chapters, what have we learned? We've seen how a scandal built on an elaborate lie could help ignite a revolution and bring a queen to the guillotine. We've seen how a president's private choices led to his public impeachment and fundamentally reshaped the American political and media landscape. We learned that a prince's reckless affair could provoke his brother, the king, to pass a law that would control the royal family's romantic destinies for centuries. And we've seen how the mere rumor of a romance between two global icons could create a myth so powerful it outlived them both, shrouded forever in tragedy and mystery. These stories, separated by centuries and circumstance, all point to one powerful, undeniable truth. The line between the personal lives of the powerful and public political outcomes is dangerously, often explosively thin. Private relationships, especially when they involve forbidden love, public trust, and massive media attention, have the power to trigger historical change on a grand scale. These affairs weren't just about sex or love, they were about power, perception, and the brutal, unforgiving court of public opinion. They exposed the rawest nerves of their respective eras, anxieties about class, morality, foreign influence, and exactly what we demand from our leaders. They show us that history isn't only made on battlefields or in parliaments. It's also made in quiet moments, in secret letters, in whispered conversations, and in illicit encounters that were never supposed to see the light of day, because when they do, they can change everything. But now I want to hear from you. Which of these scandals do you think had the biggest long-term impact? Was it the diamond necklace affair, which helped topple a monarchy? Or the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, which arguably defined the modern era of partisan politics? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you thought these stories were scandalous, just wait until we dive into the sordid world of Renaissance popes. You won't want to miss that, so make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching.